Those fans will be split into sessions, with vaccinated fans getting special stickers for access closer to the stage. Still, everyone will be masked.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson.
This past weekend, I watched all 3 days coverage of the 2021 NFL Draft live from Cleveland, Ohio. The first round of the draft was broadcast live on primetime television on ABC, ESPN, and the NFL Network with 50,000 fans in attendance. For the millions of fans who watched the draft live on TV, you'll know that there were two specific words mentioned constantly throughout the broadcast, even more so than the words quarterback, pass rusher, and Alabama. Those words were vaccine and vaccination. Those two words were repeated hundreds of times all throughout the broadcast. The NFL was excited to point out that it had created a two-tier fan experience, with the section closest to the stage being available for vaccinated fans only, along with another section hundreds of meters away from the stage for non-vaccinated fans. The NFL even allowed one vaccinated fan from each team to be on stage while that team made their draft selection, and they also allowed a few of the vaccinated fans to make the team's draft picks live on air.
With the 108th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Darren Hall, defensive back, San Diego State.
The broadcast team went out of their way to point out everyone who was and wasn't vaccinated, from fans to coaches, general managers, to stadium and team officials. Vaccines have been around for a very long time, so why all of a sudden does the NFL feel the need to point out who and who isn't vaccinated all throughout an entire broadcast? Having watched the NFL religiously for 40 years, I know full well that they don't do anything for free. So why was the NFL pushing vaccination harder during the draft than any product I've ever seen them push in my entire life? It started to make me wonder what company or individual could have the resources to get the NFL to go so far off script during the draft that instead of talking about the players and their amazing accomplishments of making it to the NFL, they instead were more focused on telling their audience what team officials had been vaccinated. The U.S. government recently announced a $1.5 billion marketing campaign designed to persuade the American public to get vaccinated. Did the NFL receive any of that funding, or did the push come from one of their biggest sponsors?
The world is on the brink of a great scientific achievement. A COVID-19 vaccine will likely be ready by early next year.
Following the money is usually a very good way to find the answers to many of life's questions. In 2013, the NFL formed a partnership with Bill Gates-owned Microsoft to the tune of $400 million over 5 years. The deal allowed Xbox One to provide exclusive NFL content and for the Microsoft Surface tablets to be used exclusively on the sidelines by all NFL teams. On March 3rd of 2020, the NFL announced it had extended its partnership with Microsoft. However, the terms of that deal were not made public. If you know anything about the business of sports that involves the NFL, if the original deal back in 2013 was worth $400 million, the chances of it being worth close to double that amount in 2020 are pretty high. In spite of the fact that many of the NFL's most influential voices have publicly denounced the Microsoft Surface as a very poor product, the NFL continues to force the use of the product on teams during games.
I'm done with the tablets. They're just too undependable for me. There just isn't enough consistency in the performance of the tablets, so I just can't take it anymore.
The NFL is so willing to appease Microsoft that Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger was fined $5,000 in 2019 for simply wearing an Apple Watch on the sidelines. Prior to being involved in sports and media, I spent over 20 years working as an agent and concert promoter, running my own agency for over a decade, and also working for one of the biggest talent agencies in North America. I've also worked in the marketing department for McDonald's Restaurants of Canada. So needless to say, I have a pretty good idea what a designed and paid for marketing campaign intended to persuade the public looks and smells like. The 2021 NFL Draft was a designed and paid for marketing campaign created to persuade the public into being vaccinated. The only question is, who paid them and how much? Another question football fans should be asking themselves is, since when did the NFL start caring about anyone's health? Ever?
On my days covering sports, one of the most sobering moments came at an NFL Hall of Fame weekend, entering a banquet hall filled with retired football legends in obvious pain. It is stunning to see these demigods of Sunday's past shake hands with mangled fingers and shuffle on gimpy knees. But back then, few realized that the most devastating scars were behind many of those famous faces. Countless concussions led to an historic settlement today.
The NFL spent many years and countless resources trying to cover up evidence that head injuries sustained while playing football created long-term brain disorders along with very serious medical issues. Many of you have seen the film Concussion starring Will Smith as Dr. Bennett Omalu, who helped discover the damages that football causes to the brain, which helped thousands of former players in a lawsuit that forced the NFL to pay out close to $1 billion in damages. But now all of a sudden the NFL is in the business of promoting health? For the past few decades, the NFL has profited billions of dollars from commercial after commercial during games, promoting the consumption of beer, chicken wings, pizza, soda, and all sorts of fast foods. This is the same league that has produced countless amounts of rapists and murderers. Think about your place of employment. How many fellow or former co-workers have been convicted of rape or murder? Yet this is an all too common occurrence with former employees of the NFL. And again, I ask, since when did the NFL begin to start caring about the physical or mental health of any of their employees, or even you? Don't you remember all those amazing acts of patriotism the NFL showcased over the years, with members of the United States military being paraded all across stadiums on national television, highlighted by those incredible flyovers by the U.S. Air Force? Well, it turns out the NFL wasn't doing that out of the goodness of their heart, but rather they were paid advertising opportunities. The United States military has handed over millions of dollars over the years to the NFL to get that TV time in order to increase enrollment.
Along with sports fans across America, I was appalled to learn last month that many of the ceremonies honoring members of our armed services at NFL games are not actually being conducted out of a sense of patriotism, but for profit in the form of millions of dollars in taxpayers' money.
Sound familiar to anything that happened this past weekend? Look, I love football. I played and coached the game for many years, and I'm blessed at the lifelong friendships and experience I encountered because of the game. But there's an old saying, there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. This is not an anti-vaccination message, because I could care less what decisions people choose to make with their own body. I just think the NFL needs to be less deceitful in their messaging to the public. The NFL doesn't have some altruistic motive of helping the greater good of society. What you saw this past weekend at the NFL draft was a paid advertisement for vaccination.
Look at this draft hall filled with vaccinated people. We're off and running.
Just know that this league doesn't have you or your family's best interests at heart when it comes to your health and medical procedures. Don't listen to the TV. Make your own decisions. I know people will ask if watching the NFL draft has turned me off the league and if it will change my desire to watch football. Well, the answer is simple. Hell no. I can't wait for the first weekend in September to see how the partnership of Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence unfolds in Jacksonville this season, or to see if Josh Allen can get the Buffalo Bills over the hump and finally win the Super Bowl. I love football. Let's go Bills Mafia.